Welcome back to Stories by Emma. Today, I've got a story that's going to pull you in from the very first moment. It's about a devoted mother who sacrificed everything to raise her son and build a home for him, only to be humiliated by her own daughter-in-law inside that very house. Just when it seemed like her life was falling apart, a shocking secret from the past turned everything upside down. Stick with me until the end, because this journey is filled with betrayal, resilience, and an unexpected new beginning. You won't want to miss how it all unfolds, right here on Stories by Emma. Margaret's story begins long before the drama with her daughter-in-law ever unfolded. She was a single mother, and for more than 2 decades, her entire world revolved around raising her only son, Ethan. From the moment he was born, Margaret knew she would have to work twice as hard to give him a future worth fighting for. She picked up double shifts at the diner, cleaned offices late into the night, and even worked weekends just to make ends meet. Every dollar she earned was stretched carefully. Some went to pay off the 30-year mortgage, some to cover the never-ending utility bills, and the rest went toward Ethan's school supplies, clothes, and eventually his college tuition. There were nights when Margaret came home after midnight with her feet swollen, her hands cracked from scrubbing floors, and only a few hours left to sleep before she had to start all over again. But through all the exhaustion, she held on to one thought: that her son would never feel the weight of poverty the way she did. The house they lived in wasn't just brick and wood. It was her pride, her blood, her sweat, and her tears. Every nail hammered into its walls carried the echo of her sacrifices. To Margaret, it wasn't just a home. It was proof that all those years of struggle had meaning, that she had built something solid for Ethan's future. And yet, she never expected that this very home would become the setting for her deepest heartbreak. When Olivia entered Ethan's life, Margaret tried her very best to welcome her with open arms. After all, she wanted nothing more than to see her son happy. At first, Margaret cooked Sunday dinners, shared family recipes, and even passed down little traditions, hoping Olivia would feel like part of the family. But soon, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. Olivia's smile carried a hint of arrogance, and her words often dripped with subtle disdain. She criticized the furniture Margaret had saved years to buy, scoffed at the old photographs on the wall, and rolled her eyes at the simple meals that had once brought Ethan so much comfort. What hurt most was the way Olivia began to twist Ethan's perspective, planting seeds of embarrassment about his mother's humble lifestyle. Margaret, who had once been the center of Ethan's world, started to feel invisible inside her own home. The tension finally boiled over one afternoon when Olivia, in front of Ethan and a group of friends, coldly referred to Margaret as the maid. The room fell silent, but Olivia smirked as though she had won some invisible battle. Ethan, torn between the 2 women he loved most, said nothing. For Margaret, that silence was deafening. After decades of sacrifice, being dismissed and disrespected in her own house was the deepest wound of all. With trembling hands and a heavy heart, she reached for her keys, pressed them into Olivia's palm, and whispered the words that would mark the turning point of her life. Good luck with the mortgage. Margaret walked out of the house that evening with nothing but a small suitcase and the weight of betrayal pressing on her shoulders. The air felt colder, sharper, as if the very world had shifted against her. She had poured over 20 years of labor, sweat, and sacrifice into that home. Yet in the blink of an eye, she was treated like an intruder in her own life. For hours, she wandered the quiet streets, unsure of where to go, until her mind returned to the one place she had almost forgotten: an old, modest apartment left to her by her great-aunt Ruth. The building was tucked away on the edge of town, far from the bustle of Ethan's world, and though it was small and dusty, it greeted her with a kind of silence that felt like relief. Margaret unlocked the creaking door, set down her bag, and looked around at the faded wallpaper. cracked window, and the smell of age lingering in the air. Strangely, it didn't feel like loss, it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, she didn't have to cook for anyone, didn't have to listen to criticism, didn't have to feel invisible. But as she began to settle into this new chapter, she stumbled upon a box of old family documents tucked away in a corner. Inside were yellowed hospital records that would shake her to the core, revealing a secret so shocking that it made her question everything she thought she knew about her life, her home, and even her son. Late into the night, Margaret sat on the dusty floor with the box of documents spread around her. At first, she thought they were just routine papers. Old bills, insurance forms, maybe even a few letters from her aunt. But then her eyes froze on a stack of hospital records marked with the date of Ethan's birth. Her heart skipped a beat as she traced the faded ink. There was her name, Margaret Sullivan, listed as the mother, but something didn't add up. Another file, stamped on the exact same day, detailed a hospital error. 2 newborn boys had been mixed up in the maternity ward. The note was clinical, almost cold, but its meaning was shattering. The child she had brought home, the boy she had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, Ethan, was not her biological son. Margaret's chest tightened, her breath shallow, as disbelief crashed into her like a tidal wave. She clutched the papers, whispering Ethan's name as if saying it aloud could undo the truth. The room spun with memories of scraped knees, bedtime stories, and long nights of working herself to the bone. All of it suddenly blurred with doubt. Then, another name caught her eye. Michael Jameson. According to the records, he was her real son, living somewhere nearby. Margaret's tears flowed freely now, a mix of grief, confusion, and a strange, fragile spark of hope. She had lost the home she built, but perhaps fate was opening a door she never knew exist. In the days that followed, Margaret couldn't shake the name Michael Jameson from her mind. Every night she pored over the hospital documents, her fingers trembling as she traced the handwriting of nurses and doctors who had long since disappeared from her life. She needed to know who Michael was, not just as a name on a file, but as the son she had never held, never rocked to sleep, never walked to his first day of school. Quietly, she began searching. She visited the county records office, combed through old directories, and even struck up casual conversations at the local coffee shop, hoping someone might recognize the Jameson family. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Michael was a young man in his late 20s, just like Ethan, and he ran a small independent bookstore downtown. One afternoon, Margaret walked past the shop, her heart pounding against her ribs. Through the glass window, she saw him, tall, with a calm presence, carefully arranging a display of novels. There was something about the slope of his shoulders, the curve of his jawline, that mirrored her late father. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, torn between running inside and vanishing before anyone noticed. Margaret's instinct told her not to rush. For now, she watched from a distance, memorizing his movements, his laughter with customers, the gentle way he handled books. It was both comforting and heartbreaking. Her son was so close, yet still a stranger. She promised herself she would find the right moment to step into his world. But deep down, she feared what the truth might do to him, and to Ethan as well. When Margaret finally handed the evidence to the right people, Olivia's carefully built facade began to crumble almost overnight. The whispers turned into headlines: fraud, forgery, financial misconduct. Customers pulled away from her ventures, creditors demanded answers, and the same neighbors who once admired her polished image now looked at her with disdain. Olivia's confidence shattered as lawsuits stacked against her, and the glamorous lifestyle she flaunted vanished piece by piece. Ethan, at first defensive and confused, tried to believe his wife's excuses. But late at night, as he sifted through the documents Margaret had collected, denial gave way to dread. He remembered moments he had brushed aside, the sudden debts, the lies about where the money went, the dismissive way Olivia spoke to his mother. For the first time, he saw the cracks not just in Olivia's story, but in his own choices. Guilt weighed heavily on him. Guilt for not standing up for Margaret, for letting her walk out of the home she built, and for allowing Olivia's charm to blind him to the truth. One evening, Ethan sat alone in the empty living room, the silence pressing down on him like a punishment. The house no longer felt like a home. It was a monument to betrayal, and in that heavy silence, a single thought grew louder. He needed to make things right with his mother, before it was too late. The day Margaret chose to face Ethan was one she would never forget. She invited him to her modest apartment, the place that had become both her refuge and her prison of secrets. Ethan arrived looking weary, his usual confidence stripped away by the weight of Olivia's downfall. For a moment, mother and son sat in silence, the distance between them thicker than words. Then, with trembling hands, Margaret laid the hospital documents on the table. Her voice cracked as she explained how she had discovered the truth, that the boy she had brought home from the hospital was not her biological child. Ethan's eyes widened, his face pale as he scanned the files. He shook his head, struggling to process. "So I'm not your son," he whispered, his voice breaking. Tears streamed down Margaret's face as she reached for his hand. "You are my son," she said firmly. "Every scraped knee I bandaged, every meal I worked 2 jobs to put on the table, every sacrifice, those were real. Blood doesn't erase love." Ethan's grip tightened, but confusion still clouded his eyes. Margaret then spoke Michael's name, telling him about the bookstore, about the man who shared her blood but not her memories. Ethan listened, torn between shock and sorrow. Yet in his mother's trembling voice, he heard not betrayal, but truth and unwavering love. For the first time in years, Ethan truly saw Margaret, not as the maid Olivia once mocked, but as the unbreakable woman who had built his life from nothing. And in that moment, he vowed silently never to let her stand alone again. Margaret waited 3 days before she found the courage to step into Michael's bookstore. Her heart raced as the bell above the door chimed, announcing her presence. The shop smelled of old paper and fresh coffee, shelves lined with stories that had shaped countless lives. Michael stood behind the counter, arranging a stack of hardcovers. He looked up, and their eyes met for the first time, not as strangers passing on the street, but as mother and son bound by fate. Margaret's breath caught. She saw the echo of her father in Michael's brow, the warmth of her late husband in his smile. But Michael only offered a polite nod, unaware of the storm beneath her calm exterior. She browsed slowly, fingers brushing along the spines, rehearsing words she wasn't sure she'd ever be ready to speak. Finally, she approached the counter, buying a small poetry collection she didn't need, just to hear his voice. "Did you find everything okay?" he asked kindly. His tone was gentle, carrying a patience that tugged at something deep within her. Margaret wanted to say it then, that she was his mother, that life had stolen decades from them both. But fear held her tongue. Instead, she smiled and replied softly, "Yes, thank you." Leaving the store, tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't the moment for revelations, but it was a beginning. For the first time in years, Margaret felt a fragile hope bloom inside her. The path ahead would be complicated, but she knew one day she would tell Michael the truth and pray he'd accept her into his life. Over the weeks that followed, Margaret returned to Michael's bookstore again and again, each visit a small step toward the truth. At first, she stayed quiet, letting conversations linger on books and simple pleasantries. But slowly, Michael began to recognize her warmth, the way she listened with genuine interest, the almost maternal concern in her eyes. He started setting aside novels he thought she'd enjoy, brewing an extra cup of coffee when he saw her walk through the door. Margaret felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't thought possible. Every smile, every shared laugh felt like stitching together the years life had stolen from them. Ethan, too, began visiting, standing awkwardly at first in the narrow aisles before Michael welcomed him as just another customer. Though Michael didn't yet know their connection, the sight of her two sons under one roof filled Margaret with a cautious joy. For the first time in decades, she felt surrounded by the essence of family, not defined by walls or blood alone, but by choice, by love, and by second chances. Her old home, with its bitter memories, no longer weighed on her spirit. Instead, the bookstore's quiet hum, the scent of coffee and paper, became her sanctuary. Margaret realized she had found something greater than revenge or restitution. She had found belonging. And as she walked out of the shop one evening, the autumn air crisp around her, she whispered to herself, "This is home." The day finally came when Margaret could no longer keep the truth locked inside. She invited Michael to a quiet cafe nearby, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around a steaming cup of tea. Ethan sat beside her, nervous but determined, ready to support his mother. When Michael arrived, his easy smile settled her nerves for a fleeting moment, but soon the weight of her secret pressed down again. Margaret took a deep breath and slid the old hospital documents across the table. "Michael," she began, her voice wavering, "there's something you need to know. 35 years ago, a mistake at the hospital changed all our lives. You are my biological son." Silence followed, heavy and disbelieving. Michael blinked, scanning the papers, then looking from Margaret to Ethan. Confusion painted across his face. This can't be real," he whispered. Tears welled in Margaret's eyes as she reached across the table. "I didn't raise you, but I have loved you every day without even knowing. And Ethan, though not of my blood, is my son in every way that matters." Ethan nodded, his own voice breaking. "She's telling the truth, Michael. And if you'll let us, we want you to be part of our family." Michael sat back, breath unsteady, emotions battling across his face. At last he exhaled and gave a faint, trembling smile. "Maybe. We can try." Relief washed over Margaret as tears of joy replaced years of grief. For the first time, she felt whole. 2 sons by her side, and a new chapter of family just beginning. Life has a way of surprising us, even when we feel everything has been lost. Margaret's story reminds us that family is not only written in blood, but in love, sacrifice, and the choices we make every single day. She could have allowed bitterness and betrayal to define her, but instead, she chose courage. Courage to walk away from humiliation, courage to uncover the truth, and courage to open her heart again. Through her pain, she found strength. Through secrets, she found clarity. And through new beginnings, she rediscovered what home really means. For all of us, this story is a gentle reminder that no matter how broken the past may feel, it doesn't have to dictate the future. Forgiveness, resilience, and the willingness to embrace second chances can transform even the darkest moments into something meaningful. Margaret didn't just reclaim her sense of self. She built a new life filled with hope and belonging. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson here. Home is not just a house or a name on a mortgage. Home is the people who stand with us, who see us, and who choose us again and again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need a reminder about the power of love and second chances. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. We have so many more powerful life stories to share with you, right here on Stories by Emma. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.